In June of 2018, researchers from the Massey Herbarium at Virginia Tech walked onto a property in Clarke County, Virginia, and found something that was not supposed to be there. 30 plants, some of them taller than a grown man, with hollow stems marked in dark purple blotches and flower heads spread wide as a bicycle wheel. The herbarium's curator, Jordan Metzgar, confirmed what local officials had already begun to suspect. This was giant hogweed, Heracleum mantagasianum, and it had never before been documented growing wild in the state of Virginia. The plant looks almost gentle from a distance, a taller, more dramatic cousin of Queen Anne's lace. Up close, it is something else. Its sap contains chemical compounds that, once they touch skin and meet sunlight, can cause burns severe enough to blister, scar, and in some cases threaten a person's eyesight. Officials in Virginia would spend the following weeks warning residents not to approach the plant, not to mow it, not to touch it even with gloves that had already brushed a torn stem. For years before that discovery, the plant's confirmed range across the United States had followed a familiar shape. Pockets in the Northeast, pockets in the Mid-Atlantic, a separate cluster in the Pacific Northwest. Virginia had not been one of those pockets. Now it was. Just one state away, in West Virginia, officials were watching a different kind of gap. Pennsylvania had giant hogweed. Maryland had giant hogweed. Now, Virginia did too. West Virginia, sitting in the middle of all three, did not. At least not according to any confirmed record. A plant capable of causing third-degree burns was standing at the door of a state it had, as far as anyone could tell, never actually entered. The question worth sitting with is not simply whether that door will eventually open. It is whether it already has, and no one has walked far enough down the right creek bed to notice. To understand why a missing state matters, it helps to understand how carefully this plant is actually tracked. Giant hogweed sightings across the country feed into EDDMapS, the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System, maintained by the University of Georgia's Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. The United States Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service runs its own parallel survey, the National Agricultural Pest Information System, where participating states report confirmed populations year by year. This is not folklore passed between gardeners. It is federally coordinated surveillance of a plant that carries federal noxious weed status, which makes it illegal to sell, transport, or intentionally propagate anywhere in the country. Even this coordinated system has an acknowledged blind spot. The Purdue University-run pest tracker that hosts the federal survey data notes plainly that its maps represent only the survey information submitted by participating states in a given year, not a complete distribution record, and that neither the tracking consortium nor the USDA certifies the map as fully accurate or complete. In other words, the absence of a confirmed sighting in a given state is not the same thing as proof the plant is not there. It may simply mean no one submitted a report that year. By the time Virginia's population was confirmed, the plant's documented range already stretched across a wide and specific set of states: New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, Illinois, Michigan, North Carolina, Washington, and Oregon on the opposite coast, 4 Canadian provinces beyond the border. Virginia's discovery made it the 12th confirmed state, according to reporting at the time from Scientific American, sitting alongside the researchers who had just found it. Each of those states runs its own detection and control apparatus. New York's is the oldest and most extensive, run by the state's Department of Environmental Conservation. Landowners who suspect they have found the plant call a dedicated hogweed hotline, submit photographs, and if the sighting is confirmed, crews arrive to remove it using root cutting or, for larger infestations, herbicide treatment. Sites are then monitored for 3 consecutive plant-free years before they are formally declared eradicated. It is patient, unglamorous, well-funded work, and it exists precisely because the plant does not stay where it is put. New York's program classifies every site it tracks by how many plants it contains, from small colonies under 100 plants up to large infestations of 400 or more. And in recent years, crews have begun conducting dedicated stream surveys, walking upstream from known sites, specifically because waterways are how the plant's range quietly expands without ever crossing a road or a property line anyone is watching. It is the kind of granular, methodical bookkeeping that makes it possible to say with some confidence which states have giant hogweed and, just as importantly, which ones, as far as anyone can currently tell, do not. That patience is necessary because giant hogweed does not need much help to move. A single plant can produce up to 20,000 seeds in a season, according to Oregon State University's Extension Service. Those seeds are light enough to travel on wind and buoyant enough to float on water for up to 3 days, which is why the plant tends to follow rivers and streams outward from wherever it first took root. Mowing equipment and construction machinery can carry seeds along roadsides, and once seeds settle into soil, they do not need to sprout right away. They can remain viable for 5 years, and by some estimates, as long as 10, waiting. This is the context in which West Virginia's absence from the map becomes strange rather than simply incidental. By 2024, reporting from the Pendleton Times, drawing on West Virginia University's Extension Service, described the plant as having been seen in the wild in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, and Virginia, the 4 states that share a border with West Virginia, without a single confirmed wild population inside the state itself. The Extension Service's own language for this was almost literal. Giant hogweed, it said, continues to knock on the doorway of the mountain state. A doorway implies 2 things. It implies a barrier, something that has, so far, held. And it implies that the thing on the other side is trying, actively, to get through. Whether either of those implications is actually true is the question this investigation exists to answer. The clearest picture of what happens once giant hogweed establishes itself comes from New York, where the state has now been tracking the plant for well over a decade. According to the Department of Environmental Conservation's own 2022 annual summary, the program was tracking 2,831 sites statewide, some fully eradicated, some still active, spread across dozens of counties concentrated in central and western New York. In that single field season, crews reported controlling nearly 500,000 individual plants. That is not a plant that arrived once and sat quietly. It is a plant that, left alone, multiplies into the tens and hundreds of thousands across a state, which is exactly why every other state bordering an infested one treats a new sighting as urgent rather than curious. Virginia's 2018 discovery in Clarke County was the next data point moving south. And unlike New York's decades-old, well-mapped infestation, this one came with almost none of that history attached. 30 plants, 1 property, no prior confirmed record anywhere in the state. Researchers described it as an isolated population rather than the leading edge of a spreading front, but its mere existence proved something uncomfortable. The plant's range could still expand into new states that, until recently, had every reason to believe they were outside its reach. Then the ring around West Virginia began to tighten from more directions. The 2024 Pendleton Times, reporting on West Virginia University Extension Service materials, placed confirmed wild populations not only in Virginia, but in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Maryland as well, all 4 of them sharing a border with West Virginia itself. That is a materially different situation than a single isolated Virginia population. It means that by the mid-2020s, a plant capable of 3rd-degree burns had confirmed footholds on every side of one specific, still apparently clean state. None of these sightings happened in coordination. They were reported years apart by different agencies using different survey methods, in states that do not routinely share hogweed data with each other in real time. And yet the pattern reads, from the outside, like a single slow encirclement. Which raises a harder question than simply where the plant is. A plant that spreads primarily through heavy seeds that fall close to the parent, occasionally carried further by water, wind, or a mower blade, should not be capable of producing a coordinated ring around a single state through pure coincidence. Something is either connecting these separate populations, or something about West Virginia itself so far is not letting the ring close the last few miles. There is an odd asymmetry buried in that regional picture worth pausing on. The West Virginia University Extension Service, in the same reporting that described the plant knocking on the state's door, also noted that giant hogweed's sap, whatever it does to human skin, does not appear to harm livestock. and that grazing animals are in fact considered one effective, if unglamorous, tool for controlling small infestations. The danger, in other words, is not a general biological hazard radiating outward from the plant. It is specific to human skin, human eyes, human exposure to sunlight afterward. Whatever is drawing this plant toward a particular set of states, it is not being filtered out by the landscape itself. It is being filtered, if it is being filtered at all, by something closer to human contact and human notice. The severity of what these confirmed populations put nearby residents at risk of is not exaggerated by comparison to ordinary poison ivy or stinging nettle. Jordan Metzgar, the same Virginia Tech curator who helped identify the Clarke County plants, described the resulting burns to Live Science as pretty horrific, worse than an ordinary sunburn, capable of producing blistering that can take weeks to heal and scarring that can last for years. New York's own Department of Health has published specific first aid guidance for exactly this reason. Wash any exposed skin immediately with soap and cold water, stay out of direct sunlight for at least 48 hours afterward, and seek medical attention if a reaction develops, because the skin's sensitivity to light does not necessarily fade quickly, and in documented cases has persisted for years after the initial contact. If the sap reaches a person's eyes, the same photochemical reaction can cause temporary or, in severe cases, lasting vision loss. That is the scale of harm sitting just outside West Virginia's four borders. It raises the harder question this investigation has to sit with next, not simply whether the plant will eventually cross into the one state that has, so far, avoided it, but how. Mechanically, it manages to do this kind of damage in the first place, and whether that mechanism has anything at all to do with which side of a state line it ends up on. The damaged giant hogweed causes traces back to a specific family of chemical compounds in its sap called furanocoumarins, among them psoralen, bergaptan, and xanthotoxin, compounds the plant produces throughout its stems, leaves, and seeds. On their own, sitting on skin in the dark, these compounds are relatively inert. The danger only activates in sunlight. Ok Chun, a nutritional scientist at the University of Connecticut who studies furanocoumarins, explained the mechanism to Scientific American in terms that make the plant's defense strategy sound almost deliberately engineered. Ultraviolet light from the sun excites electrons within the furanocoumarin molecules once they are on the skin. In that excited state, the molecules bind directly to two of the four chemical bases that make up human DNA, thymine, and cytosine. That binding disrupts the cell's ability to copy its own DNA into RNA and manufacture proteins, essential processes for basic cell function. The skin cells affected by this disruption die, and the visible result is a burn that blisters and later peels, clinically labeled phytophotodermatitis, a word built from the Greek roots for plant, light, and skin. This is not a simple chemical burn, the kind you would get from touching bleach or a hot pan. It is closer to a targeted disruption of the machinery inside individual cells, triggered specifically by the combination of the plant's chemistry and the sun, which is part of why the injury behaves so differently from ordinary contact dermatitis. The reaction is not always immediate. Symptoms can begin within 15 minutes of exposure or take up to 48 hours to fully develop. And even after the visible burn heals, the affected skin frequently remains hypersensitive to sunlight for months, in some documented cases for years afterward. Giant hogweed is not the only plant that produces furanocoumarins. According to McGill University's Office for Science and Society, related compounds show up in parsnips, celery, fennel, dill, limes, figs, and even certain citrus, which is why brushing bare skin with lime juice and then sitting in the sun can occasionally produce a mild version of the same reaction. What sets giant hogweed apart is concentration and delivery. Its sap carries these compounds in far higher quantities than a kitchen vegetable ever would. And because the plant grows tall enough to brush against a person's face and arms at head height, contact tends to affect far more exposed skin than a stray splash of citrus juice ever could. The concentration of these compounds is not fixed year-round either. Research on the plant's phototoxicity has found that furanocoumarin levels fluctuate across the growing season, peaking in June and dropping toward their lowest by November, and that the plant's unripe fruit carries some of the highest concentrations of all. That detail matters practically. It means the exact same plant, brushed against in early summer, poses meaningfully more risk than the same plant touched in late autumn, a seasonal window that most casual hikers or landowners clearing brush have no reason to know about. Here is where the doorway metaphor from earlier starts to strain. Nothing about this mechanism has anything to do with state lines, climate zones, or how close a given patch of ground is to Pennsylvania. The chemistry that makes giant hogweed dangerous is identical. Whether the plant is growing in a well-mapped New York County or a West Virginia streambank, no survey crew has ever walked. The danger travels with the plant itself, not with the region it happens to be standing in, which leaves an honest gap in the explanation. Understanding exactly how the sap damages skin says nothing about why some ecologically similar, climatically similar places have confirmed populations and others, so far, apparently do not. The mechanism explains what happens the moment someone touches the plant. It does not explain why West Virginia, sitting in the middle of 4 states that already have it, has so far avoided a confirmed sighting of its own. 2 genuinely different explanations exist for why giant hogweed's range looks the way it does, and neither one fully rules out the other. The first is essentially climatic. A peer-reviewed range modeling study published in the journal Biological Invasions used species distribution modeling, specifically max-ent and logistic regression techniques, built from the plant's known life history and existing occurrence data, to project where in North America giant hogweed could still plausibly spread. The researchers found that the areas of highest habitat suitability tend to overlap with dense human population, and that most of those highly suitable core areas have already been invaded. But the study also identified real remaining room for expansion, specifically into areas adjacent to that existing core, and into what the researchers described as novel, less populated, mountainous, and maritime locations. West Virginia, with its mix of forested mountains and river valleys, fits that description uncomfortably well. Under this explanation, the doorway is real, it is climatic and ecological, and the plant simply has not gotten through it yet, though the terrain on the other side would clearly support it if it did. The second explanation is muddier, and it has nothing to do with climate at all. Giant hogweed did not arrive in North America by seed dispersal from its native Caucasus Mountains. It was brought here deliberately. According to multiple sources, including the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program and New York's own Invasive Species Clearinghouse, one of the first documented North American plantings was in gardens near Highland Park in the city of Rochester, New York in 1917, brought over as an ornamental curiosity for its size and its dramatic white flower heads, the same reason it had already been planted in Victorian gardens across Britain. Virginia's own Clarke County population may fit this same pattern rather than representing a genuine range expansion at all. Reporting from the National Invasive Species Information Center notes that Virginia Tech researchers who helped identify the plants believe they had been planted intentionally decades before anyone found them, and stressed that the population did not appear to have spread meaningfully in the years since. Combine that with the fact that hogweed seeds can remain dormant and viable in soil for 5 to 10 years, and a simple, uncomfortable possibility emerges. A state showing up on the map for the first time does not necessarily mean the plant just arrived there. It can just as easily mean it has been sitting quietly for decades, waiting for someone to look in the right place. Neither explanation cancels the other out. A population planted decades ago in the wrong patch of ground could sit dormant in unsuitable conditions for years and then begin to spread the moment climate conditions in that specific location shifted enough to support it. What if the real answer to the doorway question is not which explanation is true, but that both are operating on the same landscape, in proportions nobody currently has the data to separate? Put those 2 explanations next to each other, and they stop competing and start reinforcing one another. Human hands planted giant hogweed in ornamental gardens across the eastern half of the country a century ago, in places selected for their gardens, not their climate suitability. Those plantings created scattered outposts far outside whatever range the plant could have reached on its own, through wind and water dispersal alone. Decades later, the climate modeling published in Biological Invasions suggests many of those exact outposts, and the land immediately around them, now sit inside zones of high habitat suitability. The human hand supplied the beachhead, The climate and the terrain supplied the conditions that let a beachhead quietly become something more permanent, spreading slowly along the same rivers and roadsides that carry its seeds. New York's own program offers a small hint at how much of this genuinely comes down to looking rather than spreading. When the state's Giant Hogweed Information Line coordinator told Great Lakes Echo in 2019 that the plant likely was not spreading significantly and that the growing number of confirmed sites mostly reflected more people reporting and more crews looking, he was describing the same ambiguity now sitting over West Virginia's border 5 years earlier and one state over. Under that combined picture, West Virginia's clean record starts to look less like a wall holding and more like an open question about where exactly anyone has actually looked. There is no comprehensive record of every Victorian-era garden planted along a West Virginia stream bank in the early 1900s. There is no way to know how many of those gardens might have included a plant valued, at the time, for nothing more than the size of its flowers. And there is no way to know how many decades a dormant seed bank might sit undisturbed in soil that has simply never been surveyed by anyone trained to recognize what they were looking at. Back in Clarke County, Virginia, the 30 plants that Virginia Tech's researchers identified in the summer of 2018 are gone now, treated and removed by people wearing eye protection, coveralls, and rubber gloves. Following the same protective protocol every state with a confirmed population now recommends, because they understood exactly what they were dealing with before they ever touched a stem. But the underlying question that discovery raised was never really about those 30 specific plants. It was about how many other quiet populations, planted decades ago for reasons that had nothing to do with invasion or spread, are still sitting unnoticed somewhere between a well-mapped state and a currently clean one, somewhere along a West Virginia creek bed this coming June, when giant hogweed's furanocoumarin concentrations are at their seasonal peak and its white flower heads are wide enough to notice from a distance. A county extension agent or an ordinary landowner clearing brush along the water's edge may walk past a stand of tall, hollow-stemmed plants with purple-blotched bark, and, for the first time, actually stop to look closely at what has, quite possibly, already been standing there for years.